Alrighty everyone, hello and welcome to take 2 of this video because my microphone died the first time I filmed it. And so none of the sound was on the video, so that was great, and we gotta do it again now. But before we get into all that, hello, my name is Sara Stresen. I am a Christian witch content creator, writer, and specifically a writer of these 2 books right here, Discovering and Discerning Christian Witchcraft, book 1 and 2, of how to put Christian and witch in the same sentence, basically. And that's very relevant for today's topic, which is about how actually oddly similar we might find a lot of the stuff between classical Christian tools and rites and rituals and classic witchy tools and rites and rituals. But do remember that we post videos like this every Friday, so if you don't want to grab those books just yet, that's fine. Go ahead and ring the bell, like the video, subscribe. I did all that out of order, but whatever. Make sure you're following with us, and if you do want to support my work a little bit more and also get these videos 2 weeks early and ad-free, just head on over to my Patreon where you get these videos and a lot of other stuff every single week. But now on the topic of this video, last time I did actually also start off with a tarot reading from God on this subject, just asking what about this topic of the similarities between Christianity and witchcraft get people so fritzy. And thankfully, I had put the cards back the way that they had been, so that means I have the card. And that card was the Two of Wands reversed, which according to this booklet means surprise, wonder, enchantment, emotion, trouble, and fear. And I do think that kind of sums up a lot of what is going on here with the drama between Christianity and witchcraft. By the way, if you hear any hoodling and doodling, that is my little boy, my little B-Log. He may come down and cause travesty, despair, and chaos, as he likes to do. But I've got my handy dandy laptop over here just to keep on track, because what I made was a table of things that I found between Christianity and witchcraft that were very, very similar, if not completely one-to-one analogous. And here is the chart that I made for your reference. Now, we're going to go through these things and talk a little bit about each one, but I'm sure, I'm positive, someone's going to come into these comments and say, well, no, none of the Christian stuff is anything like the witch stuff. The Christian stuff is totally different than the witch stuff, even though, for all intents and purposes, as I said, they are analogous. They're basically one-to-one in terms of appearance, function, and form. Now, the very first thing we have on this chart is, to maybe a few people's surprise, is divination tools. Yes, Christians have divination tools as well, just as much as witches do. The thing I think gets a lot of people in contention here is the definition of divination. A lot of people think divination is just to, I don't know, see the future, to kind of cosmically drag some lottery numbers out of the air, or, to tell if everything's going to be okay so you can chill out and stop, like, shitting your pants about something. That's really neither here nor there, to be honest. I mean, like, a lot of the verses you'll see that mention divination, oftentimes they are talking about something like that. They're talking about divination in that sense, where the words used imply some kind of reading of signs, like, for instance, clouds or birds or whatever, to basically try and guess the future, guess if they're going to have good fortune, guess if, when is the good time to do new business ventures, or and all that kind of nonsense. Same thing with astrology. Any prohibitions in the Bible against astrology followed a similar logic, because there was a difference between most other cultures' versions of astrology, and specifically Babylonian astrology. Babylonian astrology, of course, which Jewish people came in contact with during the exile to Babylon, was especially problematic because it was fatalistic, which means that the Babylonians thought that if you were going to, be born under a certain sign or whatever, you were basically condemned to whatever traits that sign pressed upon you. So if you were born under the sign of Aries, you were basically cursed to be a very aggressive, violent person. Whereas Jewish versions of astrology, which did exist, insisted that you might experience some influence from that star sign, from that, arrangement of stars. It was not set in stone because God gave us free will, and our free will is paramount over everything. Even if you have some influence from this, you can choose to accept or deny that influence and either work with it or, push against it and go a different path. Same thing later in Christianity. Christians would also, especially occult philosophers, they would come to say, well, yes, these superior bodies, these celestial bodies, right, planets and stars, they exert influence, but because Christ liberated us from death and also from every other thing, and also because we have free will, doesn't really matter. We are freed from the constraints of these bodies. We can choose to work with or against those currents, right? So when it comes to divination and astrology, yes, the Bible is kind of speaking often against putting your trust in stupid shit, like signs and clouds and all these things to make serious decisions like business decisions and other stuff. It's not talking about how I define and how a lot of other witches define divination, which is literally just communication with your spirit guides or with your god or gods, and specifically the reciprocation of all of that talking, right? Prayer is outbound, the divination is inbound. You can think of it that way. Prayer is talking, saying something to God. The divination part is how you get then the answer from God without, sitting there looking stupid and wondering if you actually heard or saw what you heard or saw. And for a lot of more new age witchy types, that's going to look like things like tarot cards, or mayhaps runes, which are more, well, it depends on the culture. You can have Nordic runes, right? You can also have Celtic runes, the Ogham runes. You can have all different kinds of runes that you can use. You can also use things like bones or charms, even beans. There's things called favomancy, where you throw down the beans and see what kind of shapes they make. There's tea leaf reading. There's coffee ground reading, which was imported to the Balkans from the Ottoman Empire. There's many different kinds of things, which kind of basically sum up to, one could say, like a spiritual Rorschach test, right? You ask a question, you scatter your runes, you scatter your bones or your beans or your coffee grounds or whatever, and you see what shapes are there, you see what symbols come up, you see what cards pop out, and you trust that whatever you just got came from the spirit you were asking, be it, again, God, any of other gods, other spirits, ancestors, whatever. In witchcraft, that's how that works. And that becomes less of a, tell the future thing, and more just a language. It's a language. When I'm asking God stuff, I'm not asking, will I win the lottery or something dumb. I'm saying like, hey God, what do you want me to focus on? Oh, okay, 3 of swords? Yeah. Right, yeah, okay. Right, what do you think I should do in this situation? What advice do you have for me? Shuffle the cards and go pull some. It's not a, what will happen. It's a, what do you think about this? And asking God's opinion on what it is, right? And a lot of Christians are going to say, no, but you don't know if it's actually God, and it's like, well, here's the thing. You could say that about any of the divination methods that God himself gives in the Bible. You could say that of the entire Bible. How do you actually know that the Bible is the inspired word of God? The only way you know is by the prophets who said that they talked to God. But if I'm saying I'm talking to God, and you're sitting here doubting that, why don't you doubt any of the prophets? Why don't you doubt any of the apostles? Why don't you doubt any of these people who say that God spoke to them? You're taking their word for it, but they don't have any more evidence of it than I do, or the next person, or anyone else. They just said, I felt this presence. It said it was God. I felt like it was God. And here's the message I got. And that's why in the Bible, God himself actually hands his own priests a divination tool, much like all of the ones I just mentioned. In Exodus, he mentions the Urim and Thummim, and what these are 2 little stones. Basically, one is one color, the other's another color, and it literally works like a yes-no situation. So what happens is, if a bunch of people are trying to interpret the law and, the Mosaic law and all this code, and they can't figure out what one law means, they go to the priest, and they say, priest, can you ask God if we should interpret it this way or this way? Is it right to interpret it this way? Is it not right to interpret it that way? Some kind of yes or no, or like option A, option B type of question. And the priest will then go into the temple or into, the tabernacle. He will go ask God the question. He will root around in his little breastplate pocket, and he will pull out one of the 2 things. And this is God's direct way, tangible direct way of giving an answer when people cannot come to an answer. Why is it important to have a tangible thing? Exactly for what I just said. Because I can say, God told me, the prophets can say, God told me, anyone can say, God told me, and people are going to sit there and say, no, he didn't. No, I don't think he did, actually. No, I think you're lying out your ass. People would do that even to God's prophets. And so this was a way for the priest to show, hey, look, I pulled this. So argue with God. I don't know, right? That's what these physical tools are for. And not only is that happening in the Old Testament with the priest, it's happening later in Acts with the apostles. The casting of lots is called kleromancy. And you might notice that anything ending in mancy refers to some kind of divination. Cartomancy is what tarot cards are, cartomancy. Then you also have, right, favomancy, literally bean divination. All these other kinds of things. And so in Acts, the apostles are casting lots to see which apostle is going to replace Judas, which person is going to be the apostle in place of Judas after, the whole betrayal thing. So what happens here is they ask God very directly, hey God, which person do you want to be the apostle? And then they cast the lots. And one of the goofiest things I see people say in rebuttal to this is, well, no, that's not divination. That's just like picking straws. It's completely up to luck. But then they ignore this proverb where, man casts a lot, but it's God who decides how it falls. If you ask God the question and you cast the lot and you get a certain one, it's God that moved it that way. It's not just chance. It's not just, a little fun game. It's divination. It's asking the divine a question and getting a tangible response that everyone can see and verify. And there's more than just casting lots and stuff. There's more than just kleromancy. There's also bibliomancy for Christians. There is this concept of taking the Bible, asking God a question, flipping to a random page, putting your finger on a random verse, and whatever verse you landed on will tell you something about your situation. This is something that my father, who went to Catholic school, was told to do by the nuns. And that is also divination. That is, ask a question, do a prayer, and then inbound receiving the answer. There are also things like dreams that show up in the Bible. In the Bible, in Genesis, God is the one who interprets Pharaoh's dreams through Joseph. Joseph asks God what that dream means, and also God himself, he delivers a lot of interesting ideas in dreams. People have dreams all the time. Pilate's wife actually has a dream saying, hey, I don't think you should crucify Jesus. I think that's a bad idea, right? So we get these dreams that God is speaking through and pushing people through all the time. These dreams, also these prophets have these wild dreams like Ezekiel. They have all these visions and things. God speaks through that as well, and very directly. And of course, there's also just a lot of cultural stuff as well. A lot of kind of syncretic cultural things come into play in certain festivals for Christians. For example, during the Epiphany, there are certain customs to bake a little figurine into one of several rolls of bread or something, and whoever gets that roll, if they get the one with the figurine in it, they're the one chosen to be blessed with luck and all this other kinds of stuff. That's also kind of like a divinatory thing that is related to Christianity, but is more like a folk cultural thing, but it's still a thing that people do. And so right away, the first thing we have is one that really signifies a big problem with, how Christians get themselves twisted in knots about this kind of stuff. And we'll talk more about that later, but keep that in the back of your mind. That divination is not what people think it is, and that, if you're using divination just to try and squeak answers and cheat codes out of the universe, that's a problem. Play the game fairly, you asshole. But if you're just using divination as a means to communicate, which clearly God also intends it to be with the way he prescribes these things, you're fine. And witches do that just as much as Christians do that. We're doing the same things. And when you know that, it really doesn't matter if you're using kleromancy, the casting of lots, or cartomancy, which is the tarot cards, or bibliomancy. Doesn't matter what form it takes, the function is the same. So as long as the function is good, and as long as the function is, for lack of a better word, kosher, then it doesn't matter what form it takes. So people saying that tarot cards are inherently satanic and evil, no. No, they are not. They are just another tool like anything else. Second thing on this list, though, is meditation tools. Because yes, Christians do meditate. I don't know where people got it from that Christians don't meditate, or if meditation is something like demonic or whatever. It's probably the same people who say that yoga is demonic, because of course they do. Christians absolutely meditate, and you'll find that witches and Christians kind of have very similar meditation tools. For witches, right, they might use crystals, sure, right? They might sit there with a crystal in their hand that symbolizes something. For example, amethyst symbolizing wisdom, and they might focus on the concept of wisdom with that thing in their hand. They might also play music that gets them in the zone, or they might even use prayer beads. there are all kinds of different pagan prayer beads that they might use to focus and, you know, might match up with certain crystals for certain intentions in order to better connect with their deities or with nature, to better connect with their own mind, anything else like that. Their meditations can be for self-exploration, for healing, you know, for kind of unwinding and unpacking some issues they're working through, or for just imagining the effects of a certain spell they're trying to take, anything like that. The meditation can really be anything. And Christians, again, have the same thing. Here in my hands is one of my rosaries. Christians are very well known for having certain kinds of rosaries. There are Anglican prayer beads. There's the Catholic rosary, which is a classic, right? There are all these different kinds of Orthodox prayer beads. And this one specifically that I have has beads made of purple lace agate. So, right, this is not only just a rosary or a prayer bead, it's also crystals. And then these crystals, purple lace agate especially, you know, symbolizes wisdom and also peace and also clarity, you know? So this is something that, like, as you go, the purpose of it is to do repetitive prayers to slow down the mind. So, you know, witches might meditate for whatever reasons, but the purpose is also to kind of like disconnect from the world for a second and kind of just slow down and focus and get some clarity. Christians do the exact same thing. And each one of these beads, the purpose of a prayer bead, rosary, anything like that, is so that you can just focus on the prayer. You do the prayer, and when you're done, you hold on to the next bead, you hold on to the next bead, la la la. So that way you can free up your mind with, you know, not having to keep count of your prayers. Instead of having to focus on like, okay, is this the 8th or the 9th one? You just hold on to the beads, and you just keep going down the line. And so see, then there's a longer chord, and this is like the first decade. Then here, you meditate on a certain mystery of the gospel. And there are different mysteries for different days, right? So some days you'll focus on the glorious mysteries, which is, you know, after Christ's resurrection. There are some days you'll focus on the sorrowful mysteries, which are all about the passion, so on and so forth, right? And it's kind of just like a massage for both mind and soul when you have this. But Christians also, right, they also have music. They have the Gregorian chants and the hymns and all those nice things. They might also do things like novenas or litanies, which are, you know, more kind of, again, longer, repetitive, focusing prayers. Especially litanies are good prayers for group focus because they're meant to be done with like a call and response. The celebrant or the preacher will kind of be like, you know, so-and-so or whatever, and then the people will respond, hear our prayer. But the point is, right, that Christians have meditation and they have meditation tools. And so witches and Christians, they both meditate and they both use tools that at first glance can look very, very similar. Now, another thing that I have on here, honestly, I'm going to put both of them, is oils and incense. And honestly, also, we might just for fun throw in salts and waters and other such things as well. For example, right, witches might have moon water, which is water that has been left out in the full moon or even the new moon and has been kind of consecrated with the moon's energy that way. And you can use that for all kinds of different things. Come on! Oppa! What? Okay. Specifically, my mom brought me back some holy water from Brescia, which is a church in Slovenia, a very famous church, basilica rather, I think. And this place is very, very well known. It also has, conveniently, a rosary surrounded by crystals inside that used to belong to one of the popes. So, while we're talking about all this here, but holy water, right, has been blessed by a priest, has been exorcised of any outside influences. It's usually combined with just like water and salt, and this is used to bless things. Likewise, moon water can be used in spells or to consecrate things, so the function there is kind of similar. There's also many salts witches can make. They can make black salt, which is good for protection. They can make fire salt, so they can, you know, all the different kinds of salts like you might see in your favorite video games. But Christians too have salt. They have holy salt, and specifically with Catholic tradition, to protect the house, you might sprinkle salt in the corners of the rooms, and this will, you know, keep evil away. And there are also spell oils and holy oils, right? So for witches, they have spell oils. You can take oil and infuse it with ingredients of your choice. Hi! Oh my god, oh my god, oh my god. But witches have spell oils that can be made with all kinds of different stuff, right? You might make a banishment oil, you might make a divination enhancing oil, depending on what ingredients you use, right? There are some ingredients that boost psychic power, like thyme or cinnamon. There are some different oils, materials that banish stuff like garlic, right? In a witchcraft paradigm, these things are symbolic, and also maybe if you are more animistic, they might contribute a little bit of assistance to whatever energy you are putting into something, right? And so these oils can be really for any purpose, but there's still the point is that you can use them then to anoint yourself, you can use them to anoint objects like candles, you can do all that kind of stuff. And in Christianity, there is also the same thing. There are things like chrism, which is a holy oil made out of balsam and olive oil that is blessed during Holy Week, right, the week leading up to Easter, and is then used especially for baptism rites. Likewise, there are other kinds of oils for anointing the sick, usually infused with peppermint, and there are oils for confirmation, which in my case at my church was infused with cinnamon. It was really funny. I posted a throwback about my confirmation, and someone was like, "I've been an Episcopalian all my life, and we never had any kind of oil like this. Why are you saying this?" And it's like, well, geez, lady, because that's literally what the bishop was telling us before he confirmed us. I didn't make it up. That's what the bishop told me, and I perked right up when he said, "Oh yeah, this oil that we're anointing you with today is infused with cinnamon." I perked up because cinnamon is known for psychic enhancement and is associated with fire and the sun. So I was like, wow, so interesting that on the ritual in which we are having hands laid on us to confer the blessings of the Holy Spirit and the gifts of the Spirit, you are blessing us with oil that has been infused with a psychic enhancing ingredient. Fascinating, right? So some people are funny, but again, you're gonna have Christians crowing and crowing and crowing. But no, it's not the items that are doing anything. No, the oil itself doesn't do anything. It's God. And it's like, yeah, no duh. Yes, right? Like, yeah, exactly. Yes, that's the point, Witchcraft can, of course, have many different things going on. You can have agnostic witches who don't believe in deities or really any kind of spirits and who use things solely symbolically. You can have witches who don't work with any deities but maybe just are animistic, as in they believe that the items they use have energy and have some kind of spirit. Or you can have some kind of deity who all of these ingredients might be offerings to in exchange for that blessing on the oil that is doing the work. So in my case, as a Christian witch, all of these things I am recruiting, I am incorporating into this, prayer pool I make to offer all of that energy up to God in return for God's blessings, which then are imbued into whatever oil or whatever I'm making. And that means that whenever I use it, it's God's power being conferred through the oil. Right? Which is exactly what the priests and the bishops do. They bless the oil, consecrate whatever the water, and it's God's power that then works through it. We are reminded of God's power working through us. So if we're going to split hairs about this, there's no hairs to split. It's the same thing. It depends on who you're calling as your source of power, of course, but functionally there is no difference in how it works, in what it does, which of course the oil is to make some effect, to heal through the reminder of God's power, or just through, whatever the oil has been blessed with, to confirm, to purify, to anoint, to protect, whatever the case is. Same idea between witchcraft and Christianity. And now, to speak of confirmation, that brings us into my next part, which is spells, cantrips, prayers, litanies, and also rituals, right? So, again, people will split hairs all day long. Spells and prayers, they say, are not the same thing. However, if we look back far enough in history, and we look back at things like the Greek magical papyri, which are some really, really old collections of Greek spells, we will see that the spells are prayers. The spells are prayers to specific gods for specific outcomes in a ritualistic manner, right? Setting up certain circles, certain sacrifices, certain offerings, and then certain steps of invocation, right? Calling on gods and their epithets, beseeching them to do something, what it is that they're accepting or expecting them to do, and then giving offerings, and then closing the ritual. That is a spell as much as it is a prayer, as much as it is a very liturgical kind of ritual. The only real distinction you can make between prayer and spell is that sometimes prayers don't ask for anything. Is that prayers in general can simply be, again, a mode of outbound communication. They don't have to ask for anything. But if you've ever prayed to God for something, for a new job, for a partner, for a new house, whatever, that is basically de facto a spell. That is a spell. Prayers for protection, prayers for fortune, prayers for stability, prayers for healing, blah, blah, all of these are basically spells. You're asking your deity for something. And so witchcraft with the spells might throw some extra bells and whistles on it, but they don't have to. You can do a spell type called a cantrip, which is just a spoken spell, which Psalms in the Bible are perfect for. Psalms and Proverbs are excellent materials to simply read aloud and say as spoken word spells without any ingredients. You are asking God to do something. You are naming the powers God has, right? For example, Psalm 107, when God breaks down gates of bronze and cuts through bars of iron. That's fantastic for what witches would call a road opener spell. A spell to clear the way and open up new opportunities for you. In a Christian context, prayers can absolutely do that. Prayers can also be offerings themselves. You can offer prayers of thanksgiving. You can offer these things up. You can also offer like worries or anything else like that up. But still, prayers can be offerings, prayers can be communication, and prayers can be spells in a Christian context. In a witchcraft context, spells are a little bit more specific, and the other things would be more delineated into those categories like offerings or like divination. But the spells, the spoken parts, and maybe whatever bells and whistles you might throw around are the components on which ritual is made. And ritual is simply the repetitive, structured, long-form, and more focused and applied version of a spell. So if a spell can be done kind of on the fly, right? You can do all kinds of magic. You can, bless a pot of food or something. You can do anything like that. Rituals require a lot of time and sometimes require multiple people. So you might have a witchcraft circle. You might have like witches coming together to do circles and spells and group spells, or doing things for certain festivals and holidays and stuff like that where they gather around, they do coordinated chants, they do coordinated movements, they, do coordinated energy-raising activities like singing or dancing or anything else like that. And then on the Christian side, you have things like Mass. You have things like the Christian liturgy, right? Where every Sunday you get in a room, you read from your holy text, you sing songs maybe, you pray together, you do litanies, you do prayers of purification or absolution, you listen to the sermon, you kind of meditate on the message, and then you raise that energy together. You spread energy when you do, peace be with you type of stuff. And all of that leads up into the energy that is poured into the Eucharist at the very end of service, right? When that bread and wine becomes blood and flesh. And then you partake, and then you go. Every Sunday, same exact format, same exact concept, all leading up to the same thing with a very consistent beat and a very consistent, channeling of energy, of a very consistent pacing and tempo. That's ritual. That is a longer form ceremony that raises, distributes, and solidifies that energy, calls down those blessings from God, so on and so forth, like any witchcraft ritual would. And some rituals are also very famous, like, for example, exorcism. This is another ritual. This is another kind of, very structured and high skill required ritual, the Catholics being the most famous for this. The witches have a similar one known as banishment. So if a witch is banishing an evil spirit, well, a Catholic priest is exorcising it, but it's the same function. It's the same idea. In fact, I have a book of blessings that Catholic priests use. I actually was at church getting an Easter basket blessed, and I happened to look under the book to see what it was that he was reading from, and I picked it up myself. And in here is basically a bunch of holy rites. Stuff like blessings for a new house, blessings for the dead, blessings for the sick, all these other kinds of things. This is a book of like ritual formats, specifically ones that require the priest and the people in the house to kind of, call and response with each other to kind of basically ping pong that energy around until it gains speed, gains traction, goes up, and then God crashes his energy down to kind of assess and fix the situation, you know? So this is basically a grimoire. This Book of Blessings is the same as any witch's grimoire, which is just a book of, again, those kinds of specific spell formulas and formats. We also have charms. Charms, things like this. These charms, and you know, even the thing I'm wearing right now, this here is a St. Benedict's medal. Christians and witches alike both have charms, which are basically just wearable spells or wearable, items, protective or otherwise, right? So a witch might make charms that do multiple different things, right? You might make a little satchel and wear it on your belt or something that can attract luck or love, depending on what colors and ingredients you use. You might also use pouches that are protective, that ward things away, depending on what ingredients you use. And Christians have similar ideas where a lot of their medals are very specifically protective or meditative. So St. Benedict's medal, here's a bigger version of it. This is a cross, and it has letters on the front and on the side. And what it says, what it means really is like, may the light of the cross be my guide, may the dragon never be my guide, the dragon being like the great evil one. So it's a protective thing, and it's also a reminder to stay focused on God, right? That's what these are for. I also have on my keychain the Miraculous Medal. My mom gave this to me, and this is like another protective thing. I have in my wallet a prayer card that has the Miraculous Medal in it. This has Mary on it, and it's a kind of prayer for Mary's intercession for protection and all that kind of stuff. And so a lot of these are going to be for protection. A lot of these are going to be to ward evil and sickness and death away. Christians also have bones for charms. They have bones, and by that I mean a lot of saint bones. These are called relics. And when I was in Czech Republic, we visited an ossuary that had a lot of bones. Had a lot of bones, and it was definitely, you could feel it was kind of haunted in there. I mean, by kind, I mean very. It was super haunted, and the energy was thick. It was a crazy space, and it was just full of real human bones. And those themselves, you're not supposed to touch those. Those are not relics really per se, but God, Christians love bones. They really love that memento mori type of stuff, the old school ones anyway. So there's a lot of that, but there's also ones like this that I saw in the St. Peter and Paul Basilica in Vyšehrad, and this had saint bones, like actual relic saint bones, just kind of hanging out. And so the thing about relics is that, most of these medals are for protection. Relics were thought to be able to heal people. They were bones or pieces of clothing from saints that if you touch them, you might be healed of any ailments, you might be healed of any demon possession or anything else like that. And those kinds of stories have been told many times, right? The healing qualities of the saint relics. So if witches have, little arts and crafts projects that represent whatever it is they're trying to gain or keep away, so too do Christians have lots of visual reminders of God and God's power and his protection and his healing. And the last thing I think we could talk about is spirit guides. Yes, both witches and Christians have spirit guides. For a witch, these spirit guides can be really anything. Could be saints, could be angels, could also be nature spirits, could also be ancestors, could even be demons if you wanted it to. Witches can have all kinds of spirit guides. Also familiars, right? If you got a pet, that can be a familiar or something. All these spirit guides, what they can do is they can offer guidance, they can offer protection, they can help you get stuff, right? They can bring luck and stuff to you, they can drive things away. Whatever relationship a witch builds with a spirit depends on the spirit and depends on what they're calling for, but all this kind of stuff can be done. With a Christian, you might think, well, we don't have anything like that. We just have God. Well, no. There's God. Naturally, God is the one that everything kind of points towards. So every single spirit a Christian can work with is going to point towards God. But there are obviously many different spirits in Christianity one might encounter. Angels, those have from, all kinds of stories in the Bible been known to mess with people or help people. There's also saints. Saints are constantly, especially in Catholic, Orthodox, and like Episcopal and other liturgical denominations, the ones that people turn to for intercession, which is not the same as mediation and is also not the same as worship. But saints, right, when you pray to a saint like Saint Joseph, for instance, praying for his intercession to help get a new house, it's kind of like the same thing as basically giving your resume to someone at a company for them to give to the boss rather than going directly. people might ask, why would you do that? And well, it depends. If you feel, for whatever reason, that you are too sinful, or you just don't feel comfortable, or you don't feel like you are worthy of going directly to God, first of all, you are, so relax. But second of all, they're just another person like you who can kind of help you, like you're skipping rocks across the river, right? Like you're jumping across them like Frogger on them logs, basically get to the other side. The saints are going to carry your prayers to God, just like angels can carry your prayers to God. So God's really still the one doing the work. It's just that you're getting a little help getting that prayer up there, you know? Especially because also some might point to Bible verses saying God doesn't listen to the prayers of the sinful. Okay, so ask a saint, and the saint's already in heaven, and the saint will be like, okay, yeah, sure, and we'll take your prayer up there. God will listen to them. Okay, right? That's the kind of theory that is being worked with there. Generally, though, I think a lot of that personally displays people's own kind of like issues of self-worth and stuff. I feel like that's a big reflection of people's like image of themselves, and also maybe their lack of understanding of like God's love and grace sometimes. But point is, saints can help. Saints still can and will, you know, just like add another voice. If you ask your mom or your dad or your friends to pray for you, asking a saint to pray for you is the same idea. Depending on the religion of the witch in question, the source of where all this power is coming from and the point of it all might be a little bit different. But functionally and in form, they are the same idea. They're the same thing. And that's actually why, you know, a lot of people might hesitate to call themselves a Christian witch, because it's kind of like, well, there's no real reason to call it witchcraft when all the stuff that we do is already in Christianity. You know, it's like we got witchcraft at home kind of thing. But at the end of the day, I mean, if you're doing all of this stuff with God as a Christian, then you're not going out of bounds of Christianity, because everything a witch could do already exists in Christianity. These are analogous things. They're one-to-one, right? Like, Christians and witches both don't have a monopoly on candles or prayer beads or herbs or crystals or spirit guides or prayer or spell work or any of these things. They're the same basic idea, just with a different source that you're asking for, right? For Christians, that's God. So anything a Christian does in this vein, if you're asking it from God, the main source of the power is God. If you're a witch and you don't believe in any gods, or if you don't believe in any one certain god, or you have a different god, or you're using different spirits or whatever, that power is going to come from somewhere else. And so, like, that's really it. That's really it. But the point is that, again, it's all the same stuff. We're doing the same things. And I think that if Christians and witches stopped arguing with each other about, well, where does it go? Who are you? If they stopped doing that and realized that actually all witches are doing is just the same thing Christians are doing, just like in a slightly, not even in a different font, just in a different style of the same font, then maybe we could stop being so ugly to each other and just recognize that all we're doing, both of us, is just practicing our spirituality. That's really it. And that's the big point I want to make with this video, is that for all that Christians and witches are constantly yelling at each other, the fact is we're all doing the same stuff, because this is what religion is. The practice, the hands-on engagement with a religion, that's what witchcraft or mysticism actually is. That's all it is. And the reason I call myself a Christian witch specifically, actually I just posted a whole blog post on it, is a lot more than just because, you know, I like the word. Yeah, sure, it's a good way for people to understand what I'm doing, and also because I do prefer things like tarot cards and, you know, spell work, specifically with the bells and whistles, over just sitting there praying or doing bibliomancy. A lot of low church Protestant types might start asking, why do you need any of that stuff? And it's because, again, they're focusing tools, they're tools to help you better connect with what you're doing. But, right, I like these kinds of things. I like the kind of empirical approach that one can take to mysticism through this practice of witchcraft and magic and occult science. I like these kinds of things. It helps me connect with it better. It helps me sink into it deeper. It helps me Why do I need it? Because it helps. If you don't need it and you can connect just fine without it, by all means, go right ahead. If you are a low church Protestant saying, all I need is God and my Bible, then go have your God and your Bible, and then leave the rest of us alone. But the point is that these tools, these rituals, right, the high church liturgy and the rosaries and all this, they are tools to help us better quiet our minds, disconnect from the world, and sink into a holy space and a holy frame of mind. And that's happening whether you call it witchcraft or whether you call it Christianity. That's happening whether you're using tarot cards or whether you're using the Bible. That doesn't really require you to do it any one way or any whatever, or any one tool or anything like that. That just requires you to have the right frame of mind going on. So, Christians and witches alike, I hope that y'all understand that y'all are not the enemies you think you are. Y'all are not so separate as you think you are. You are not so different as you think you are. You are, in fact, way closer than any of you realize. And the only real difference is simply how you're approaching the divine and which divine you're approaching to begin with. And frankly, I don't really care if someone worships God or not. I really don't. I really don't think it's my business. I don't think it's my place to judge. I don't think it's my place to say anything about that. If people find the connection to the divine they need through different deities or the nature spirits or whatever, cool, great. That's good for them, right? Me as a Christian, I personally really can only rock with God, not because that's what I'm allowed to do, but because God's the only one that I'm comfortable rocking with. And so he is my divine. Others might have a different one. Doesn't really matter. We're all here to do the same thing, which is acquire for ourselves love and peace and security and fellowship with our fellow man. And that's it. And the sooner we stop arguing about, well, demons, well, this, well, that, and the sooner we realize that we're all just doing the same thing, and we're all just looking after the same things, maybe the sooner we can stop, constantly fighting with each other in comment sections and being ridiculous online. But that's a far-fetched belief, a very far-fetched belief, and nonetheless, I mean, whatever. What matters is that you have it laid out for you here, that really, I mean, we're all in this together, and we're all just doing whatever we're doing, which all leads to the same results anyway. So, with all that said, I'll see you guys next time for some more good chats, and I hope you have a great rest of your week. See ya!